this thing could happen very soon. So top of next hour, we're going to play quarterback dominoes. There's a report about Deshaun Watson this morning that's got a little teeth to it. There's a Russell Wilson rumor. I don't think has any teeth to it, but we'll play quarterback dominoes in 1 hour from now. And Joy Taylor is joining me. Joy, how are you on a Tuesday?
I'm great. Happy Fat Tuesday. Doesn't have quite the same flair it usually does, but this is my New Orleans trip every year this time of year. So we're in LA right now, but
yeah, I've been in New Orleans in years.
Oh my God, it's my favorite place.
Is it? I want to start with this. So I see a lot of stories, and most of the time I think there's credibility. I don't think the media just makes stuff up. Sometimes in the political media, I think people have agendas, but generally in the sports media, there's no reason to be wrong on something. You wouldn't risk your career on being wrong on something. But I do think people get fed information that's sometimes erroneous or misguided. And I got nothing against Mary Kay Cabot. She's great. I've talked about her before on the show for Cleveland. But I don't buy this story for a second. J.J. Watt seriously considering the Browns as one of his options. I don't buy it for a second. There's a lot of information getting fed out there, and I'll tell you why. So there's 7, 8 teams that have been mentioned. I'll just mention them to you. Green Bay, Kansas City, Cleveland, Buffalo, Colts, Pittsburgh, Tennessee. They're all, have their pluses and minuses. The two obvious places to go would be Green Bay and Kansas City, not just because of Aaron Rodgers and Mahomes, but these are organizations that win consistently all the time, W's, and compete for playoffs. The second thing to remember with J.J. Watt, he's not going to take a huge salary. So he may have a contract structured where he makes a lot of money based on sacks. He may have some nice bonuses. Well, which teams in the NFL lead more than any other teams in the NFL? Kansas City and Green Bay. Meaning J.J. Watt in the second half is on a defense that is pass rushing an opponent that's trailing. So this makes sense for J.J. Watt. If I was J.J. Watt's agent, you want to play for the Packers, you want to play for the Chiefs. Because nobody's going to, he's an older player, he's been banged up, he's not going to get a huge salary. He could have huge bonus opportunities based on sacks and production. So you want to play for a team that is often in the lead, and you can pin your ears back and go get sacks and hits and hurries and fumbles and all that stuff. But here's why I don't buy Cleveland. Listen. It's funny about the NFL, but for the last 30 years, what I'm about to say has happened every time. But every year I suggest this, people freak out. For the last 30 years, every year, 4 teams that made the playoffs don't. And that means 4 new teams do. I know I'm going to suggest this. Cleveland's not going to make the playoffs. By the way, pom-pom waivers. I've nailed Cleveland in the last several years. Last year, a lot of doubters. Rookie coach. No preseason. I said, no. Cleveland's going to make the playoffs. I don't know if they can win a game, but they're going to make the playoffs. I was right. Year before, oh, my God, Freddie Kitchens. I said, grease fire. Won't work. Mess. I was right there, too. In fact, last year I was 7 for 7 on AFC playoff teams. I often wear a robe around Fox Sports that just says AFC King, Uncle Colin. You think of me as the herd. I'm known as AFC King, Uncle Colin. So 4 teams that made the playoffs last year are not going to make the playoffs. And I'm going to give you 2 of them. The Saints, who are in salary cap hell and won't be as good at quarterback, and Cleveland. And that's nothing against Cleveland. But I'll give you 2 numbers that are hard to argue yourself out of. Put the pom-poms down. Cleveland last year had a negative point differential and made the playoffs. Virtually impossible. Virtually impossible. The Washington football team that we all rolled our eyes that made the playoffs had a positive point differential. Cleveland had a negative point differential, meaning they got rolled a lot. And also, Cleveland, 8 of Cleveland wins, 8 of their wins came against Drek, teams that were 32, 78, and 1 in the NFL, meaning Cleveland beat a lot of bad teams. They beat a lot of bad teams, and when they faced good teams, they often got whacked, and they had a negative point differential. Cleveland's got no history. J.J. Watt's going to pick a winner. Cleveland's got no history of back-to-back years in success. They made the playoffs back-to-back years since the 80s. I mean, just think about that. That's over 30-some years ago. Secondly, they've never made a real commitment to Baker Mayfield right now, so we don't know what their future is. And third, their schedule is brutal next year. Next year, their road schedule is the Packers, the Chiefs, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, the Patriots. Minnesota's going to bounce back. They're not going to be that bad. And the Chargers with Justin Herbert in year 2. So I don't know who the new 4 teams are going to be in the playoffs, because there are going to be 4 new teams minimum next year in the playoffs. It's the way it's worked 30 straight years. My guess is the Miami rebuild will keep getting better. They had a very good draft. I suspect they'll have another one. Miami will creep in. They got close this year. I suspect the San Francisco 49ers will not have nearly as many injuries. I would guess the 49ers get in. And my 2 teams right now this morning, and I haven't laid it all out yet, but the Saints are not going to be the same team. They're not. Okay, they got cap issues. They got to let guys go. They don't have Drew Brees' leadership. And Cleveland. It was a lot of mirage last year. I was there for it. I thought they'd be a playoff team. They're not going to be a playoff team. And J.J. Watt's not going to an inconsistent franchise. He can cherry pick. He's a free agent. He can cherry pick anybody he wants to go to. He needs to go to Green Bay or Kansas City, not only because you got winning organizations and a history of smart front office moves. The second thing is they lead games at halftime, meaning he can pin his ears back, get more sacks, get more hits, get more interceptions, get more fumbles. That's how his contract is largely going to be structured, my guess today. All right, here's a story that's interesting. So we got a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff. This Carson Wentz thing, according to multiple sources who I trust, is going to happen here really quick. So he's out of Philadelphia. He's out. They're done. Whatevs. Whether you like Jalen Hurts or not, doesn't matter. He's gone. They've made a decision. So the Colts and the Bears are believed to be the 2 destinations that he's going to land. So we all know that the Colts are smart, measured, have often dominated their division. We know the Colts would be a good destination for Carson Wentz. But as I said yesterday, the Colts are not desperate. They don't have a big brother in the division they're chasing. Let me talk about a sleeping giant in the NFL, the Chicago Bears. I'm going to show you something, and it's really astounding. Should Carson Wentz be interested in Chicago? So none of you think that Mitch Trubisky is the future anywhere. If I said Mitch Trubisky is your new quarterback, none of you would cheer that, right? Like, it's over in Chicago. The last 3 years, I'm going to give you, this is in a windy city with 1 legitimate receiver. They missed Tariq Cohen last year. Last 3 years of Mitch Trubisky's numbers in Chicago. These are better than Baker Mayfield. Now, I don't think Trubisky's as good as Baker Mayfield, but these are Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield numbers. Look at Trubisky's numbers in the last 3 years with Matt Nagy. 25-13, 65% completion percentage, and a 90 passer rating. Also, 57 TDs, 3 picks. What does that tell you? It tells you that Matt Nagy just needs a quarterback. Mitch Trubisky's numbers are not that far off Matt Ryan in the last 3 years. They're not Matt Ryan. They're not that far off. So everybody understands that Carson Wentz is going to want to land in Indianapolis with the Colts. We all get that. Frank Reich, great offensive line. But I look at Chicago and I think to myself, number one, if you're Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold, anybody, Deshaun Watson, you get a great defense. You got the Lions in division. That's 2 wins a year right there. So you got a doormat in your division. You got, and Trubisky, by the way, Trubisky had played very well against the Vikings also. So you got a doormat in the Lions. You've got an excellent defense. And what's the bar in Chicago? It's not like Carson Wentz would be replacing a legend. They'd move Nick Foles out of town. Nick Foles isn't a cap hit. They'd move him out of town. They'd move Trubisky out of town. Chicago's arguably the great American sports city. It's one of the great cities in America. This kid grew up in the Dakotas. He doesn't care about cold weather. It's probably close to home. I think the Bears are a little bit of a sleeping giant. And I think the Bears should be favored. Trent Dilfer said this yesterday. I think the Bears should be favored to get Carson Wentz, and they would feel like a playoff team if they got him.
I think Chicago has to panic. They have to knee-jerk react to this. And they will probably offer more than they need to get Carson Wentz. They're the little brother in the division. They have to make this type of splash hire for two reasons. One, they got to be relevant again, and you said it. They got to save their jobs, and draft picks for Ryan Pace aren't as important because he knows he's got to win right now or he's out the door.
All right, coming up next, I wish I wasn't the only person in